Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Call this meeting to order. This is the regular session of the Reedsport School District, District 105, monthly board meeting. Could everybody please rise and pledge allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Yeah, forum. That's the one. Changes to the agenda. You have a revised agenda in front of you. Very good, thank you. Community comments. Individuals may present a community comment to the board on agenda items. Please note on the sign-in sheet which item you need to address and fill out a community comment card and the sign-in table. You are limited to no more than 3 minutes. You may address the board on a topic not on the agenda. If it does not pertain to a complaint against a staff member, mention a child. However, the board reserves the right to refer the matter to the administration. And we have one.
Two, actually. We received
Well,
one.
that's your act. Thank you for the name. All right, Mayor Adam.
Hello, Mr. Jones.
Good evening.
May I approach the bench and enter into evidence this document?
Hey.
They are. So I printed that on my own printer, so I didn't waste school funds with colored copies. And I only printed one, but I'll email the rest of the board. It's a schedule of my classroom for Q1. It's subject to change depending on what the kids need. But if you, as the board, would like to come view my classroom at any time, you may. So I wanted to hand the schedule to you all and invite you. The blue days are days where interesting things happen. The white days are days where I give assessments, so not so interesting to watch. It's very interesting for me, but thank you. It should be.
Great. And we also have a community comment was written into us. And we thank that person for presenting that to us. And to make sure they get passed on to.
Yeah, Mr. Jones, it might be worth noting that it's a student who wrote in a community comment, so protect their identity, but there was a comment about school bus belts and student safety. So that was the topic of their letter. And so we'll pass that on to the transportation department and share that with them as well.
Thank you, sir.
Received.
Okay, seeing the others, is there anything on the big screen? No, okay. Reports. Assistant Business Manager Josh Phil, please.
Good afternoon. So this month's fiscal reports holds 2 months of reporting. We have the projected ending of last year and the very start of this year. As well as I handed you guys 2 sheets of paper. On there, there's going to be grant information and topics that I'll be discussing. So last year, as you can see on the fiscal report, the projected ending fund balance is $349,216. We won't get our actual until about January once we complete audit and everything. But that was very close to our $350,000 target that we were going for. Expenditures for the general fund for July total $334,526. That's why it's so important for us to have that 350,000. Also in July, we received our first state school fund payment. We did 2 months in July because they don't pay us in June. The most recent state school fund estimate on 6/20/24 indicated that Reedsport will receive $6,465,518 roughly. They did make quite a few estimations in May and June that varied. So we'll hope to see that number stay consistent. Other things is also paying attention to enrollment. First couple months is going to be big for us. We base the state school fund off of 590, so we really need to see the enrollment stay around there. Otherwise, we may need to make adjustments. Speaking of inconsistent ODE numbers, we were recently informed that high school success grant allocation, which the second sheet you have as grant information, came in about 40,000 lower than they told us.
80,000.
40%, 80,000 lower than what they told us our allocation would be during the budget season. At the time I wrote this, they did not have an explanation out, but they released one today stating that they found out that they were not following the governmental accounting standards. They did a biennial budget, just like we do for our state school funds. And it sounds like they carried money over typically, but I found out that they cannot carry over money. So about 19.4 million that they were gonna carry over to supplement this year's will no longer be available to us. So most, if not all, school districts have received a hit to this. All they've told us at this time is that they apologize and will be following up if there's any solutions or any further assistance. But
What happened to those funds in federal government? Yes.
So the tongue-in-cheek answer we heard at the superintendent meeting is that they took those dollars and all the summer school money that we heard about in May, that's where that money was spent. And since they spent it on summer school, it's now not available for high school success that it should have been scheduled. So districts that did not get summer school money and are losing high school success are doubly disappointed. We're disappointed because 40% is a gross miscalculation on their part. Just all around bad.
So there's no impact on budget next year.
so on the grant worksheet, you can see all the grants I have received allocations for and the budgeted amounts are. What's tough with grants is I can't necessarily say it's a saving grace, but our SIA did come in a little over 100,000 higher. So that was kind of nice. SIA and high school success are all part of the integrated program. But what's tough about grants is they're restricted funding. We can only spend it on certain things. So just because one came in and kind of offsets doesn't necessarily mean that I can offset expenses for the district. Since I just got news of this, I'm gonna have to look over the grants and see what I can do. But this is causing a little bit of a shift in what we can do for funds.
A theme this year between Josh and I and in result for the entire district is we're going to sit on a little bit more money than we used to sitting on. Because frankly, we can't trust ODE to give us the right numbers. When they collect, they take it immediately. When they don't give you revenues, it's so sorry. But if we don't keep something in reserve for them to mess up with, I fear that another one of these big swings will be costly. And we don't want to go through, we did last spring with the playoffs cuts. So, where we thought we had the ability to recall more IAs for the start of the school year, we're not going to be doing that now. Have to stay where we're at and keep the people who we've laid off on a recall list until the state can come through with some consistent funding in a way that we can trust them. I think we're going on 5+ months now of revenue projections swinging wildly, and the inability for them to give us a straight answer we can rely on. So without stability from them, without consistency in how they are projecting the money, we're going to have to sit on a bit of a reserve because frankly, we can't trust them yet. We need to get back to that point we were at several years ago where we could rely on those numbers and knew what it meant and why we're reading it.
So who oversees ODE?
The governor,
Governor.
governor, the legislature, it's,
Yeah.
The government's watch.
And to wrap up, audit is next month, so we're preparing for audit. And we're currently setting up payroll for the new year. Any questions about the financials, grant paperwork, anything?
I have a couple questions, Josh.
Yeah.
And it's just clarifying the acronym. So it is the HERT tax, HERT.
Heavy equipment rental. Thanks.
That's okay. Right.
I'm pretty sure, yeah.
And that's something that we have to pay,
Hey, we receive monies.
receive money for that. Okay, all right. Thank you.
That difference, John, that we're gonna sit on, Josh, being an HSS and SIA, how much we're gonna have to sit on that full year? Full school year, or are we gonna be able to finally use like that, you know, because there's a difference, $85,000.
one example is, my conversation with our maintenance director. Where we used to be trying to be proactive on projects and spend what we were expecting to receive. We're going to wait until the last minute when we're sure we're gonna get through our fiscal year, our June calendar with money. And if there's money there to spend, we'll be a little bit more reactionary in the project. So, don't want to not spend this year's money on this year's kids. That's been my theme since you brought me on 7 years ago. But we need to be a little bit more cautious about spending the money until we can rely on the stability of it. If we can't trust the people providing it with the numbers, we need to be careful. So we'll wait till the last minute and do reactionary efforts.
Thanks, Josh. Any questions for John? Alright, superintendent report.
Okay, couple of things to run through as far as building levels. Both buildings are doing registration between the high school yesterday and the elementary school today. There's online registration, of course. Tomorrow night, the district coaching staff has their annual meeting with the AD and the business manager, me and the high school office, and getting prepped for all the seasons. Next week, we'll see the start of all sports. Next Thursday, the 22nd, at the elementary school from 2 o'clock to 3:30, there's a supply drop off. Parents and families want to drop off supplies for their students' elementary classrooms. I think we're going to be using the cafeteria and we'll be able to drop off between 2 o'clock and 3:30. Immediately following that, at 4 o'clock, we'll have a meet and greet out in Barone Park. Teaching staff will be out in Barone Park. Families will be invited, a little barbecue dinner. Also at 4 o'clock that day, the elementary class lists will be posted. So people will be able to see which classroom their student is assigned to for the following Monday. So we've got some staff who are already back. I would applaud the teachers who are showing up right now to gain training and do preparation work for school year. We have a bunch of them working on professional development with IRRE. And Ms. Collins, we've got some staff in the buildings working on just preparation for the school year. So there's a lot of busyness. They're not paid right now. This is all them being dedicated to our students, being dedicated to their craft, and just really trying to make a difference. So I applaud all those efforts. Final thing from the buildings at Highland, the parking situation in the morning is going to change because with a reduced number of IA staff able to help in the morning, we're going to have to keep flow of traffic out of that parking area by the front doors as kids are walking in and out of buses, using that crosswalk to get in the building. So from 7:30 until 8:15, that entire parking area will be closed off. We won't want any through traffic except for our school buses to minimize the potential dangers for those students coming into the building. And that's just not having staff to do those crosswalks, making them there. And all the other things that need to happen in the morning to get kids ready for school. So that change will just be something that we need to work through and help our community get used to. They'll need to park out on the street. Their students use the crosswalk or walk them in themselves.
I noticed you were advertising for volunteers for that crosswalk on Longwood. Did you get enough to do the crosswalk?
I'm understanding that we've got some, and we're gonna need to focus on making sure we've got some of our staff out there too. We really need to make sure our employees are there, but any volunteers we can get to help with things, that's the cherry on top. So the board in our last meeting had requested that we have a survey that our staff would use to give feedback about overall culture. I met with both association presidents last week. They are meeting with their associations next week. And we'll be generating questions that will reflect what staff want to talk about in a culture type of survey. So that hopefully the first week of school, with questions ready to go, we can start surveying staff, get a baseline of data and get feedback from the board that we can do on a quarterly basis. So I think we understand the assignment and the steps are moving in the right direction. And next week, once those presidents have a chance to meet with their associations and get feedback, that'll be our next progress in getting that put together. I handed you a staple packet, it's like about 15 pages, and a couple single sheets. Single sheet with pie graphs. This is the maintenance report, showing work completed, work in progress, work done, priority level of the work. Total number year to date. So just as an update of when we're busy, that whole department's busy and lots of things are happening with maintenance and custodial. The board had requested changing papers on you. Shell sheet, the green block. The board had requested a journal of when you receive complaints, concerns, issues, matters brought to your attention by people in the community, that we log it so that we can kind of see how often are items coming, what's the nature of the items coming, and I was supposed to report back to you. So that's what this particular item shows. We'll get to this, and I think this is going to deserve a board discussion after we complete our action. This is the packet of material. This is a policy from the Napa School District, and they termed this policy civility, being civil. And talking to their superintendent, right after COVID, they experienced just a lot of behavior that they didn't feel was appropriate for their school district. And so they took action as a board and created a policy. I will explain to you how this came together for Napa. Components of it, how it's in the works. I think this may be a very good model for us to use in talking about a positive culture. So I'd like to spend time during board discussion and we can just talk about this, and perhaps we'll formulate a schedule of work sessions to begin building our own version of this policy that matches what Reedsport is trying to accomplish. And there's a lot to this, and if you want to discuss it at that time, we can dive deeper. We have one more position to hire to start school. We need a special education teacher. We reached out to the contract agency as part of that, and we will continue to look to hire to fill that position. We need it for our elementary building. I think the last thing is to give a little bit of appreciation to Foursquare Church, but to all the members of the community who are involved in this project. This Saturday, the 17th, from 2 to 5 is their backpack giveaway, school supplies. They do that for the community, and that for years. And I think it was about long before I arrived. And it just is, I think it's a mark that the school year is starting, and a lot of appreciation that I know it benefits a lot of our Reed Sport students leading them ready for the school year. And so just to announce it, it's this Saturday from 2 to 5 p.m. And we'll talk about civility policy later, so that wraps up the budget.
Any questions for John?
So if you want me to jump into the other parts, you have a South Coast ESD service agreement, a South Coast ESD Tier 2 services agreement, and an estimate. I think it was Bonnie last month who requested this, but what would it cost for us to contract out grounds maintenance? And so I think you've got a quote there from one of our local vendors, just to have an idea. We did not get quotes from the other two local groups. So just as a number thrown out there for that scope of work, that's what you'll see. That includes all the reports. The quote for groundskeeping, before I came in at over $48,000. Mr. Chairman, I have a reminder from Jerry Ewing, high school principal. We also need to thank Dunes Family Medical. They gave us free sports physicals this year for our students. So much appreciation to them for supporting our students in the community as well. Thank you, Chair.
I would entertain a motion for consent agenda.
I make a motion to approve the consent agenda as printed, as proposed, A and B, 1, 2, and 3.
The move is seconded, moved by Bonnie Brewer, second by Jack Daly, approve the consent agenda. All in favor, say aye.
Oh,
Unanimous. Under action item, approve the English learners in Oregon annual report.
I have a hard time kind of not being a little snarky here because for the effort that we get from the ODE, we should have a lot of requirements for things we're supposed to do. This is an annual report that we have to do for the students that we serve in our English language learner program. And notice it's majority of your packet is quite substantial. Julie Knoll is online, and if you have any questions about this report, she is available to answer any of those questions. I thank her for serving our students in that population of students. And my frustration with this having more to do with compliance reporting in our small school district, when it's a burden on our staff, we're trying to spend the time serving kids instead of pushing paper. But Julie, thanks for being available, to answer any questions that the board has.
How long does it take you, Julie, to do these reports?
Oh, man. I couldn't even tell you, we spent, if we added it up, we probably spent, 20, well, 10 to 20 days, actually, like in a normal, but it was over the whole year, so, we got audited this year, so we had to do even more paperwork. And then they come back with us and say, you need to fix this, and so we had to go back and fix it, so it's a lot of paperwork in that way. I didn't have to do it all myself, thankfully. Corinne and Lauren helped, so that was amazing. But I can just give you a general of how our EL kids are doing. They have great attendance. I had 8 ELs, and this is the 23-24 school year. I had 8 EL students. 3 of them have exited. So that's good. We haven't exited students for a couple years now, except for graduation. Well, I would say 99% of our ELs graduate. I think we've had a couple maybe that have been life skills sped that they've come and gone, and I wasn't the coordinator then, so I'm not sure if they graduated. Let's see. So they were, oh, go ahead. Oh, I thought someone asked a question. They work really hard for me. We have such a small percentage of kiddos in our district. When you look at the state reports, we're one of the very few school districts that's considered, we don't have very many kids, so our data, we don't have a lot to compare to other districts. Like the big districts, they can compare themselves to the others, but when we have 8 kiddos, it skews all the data a little bit. And I do not have state assessment results to know how they compare to non-ELs of passing or not passing. I know that's an issue statewide of ELs not passing state assessments. I don't know this year because I have not seen those results. I know another issue with the state, we don't have as many EL students identified as TAG. But if we look at the percentages in our district, it might not be that off. Statewide, it's off, but our district, it probably isn't. And the same with sometimes our ELs are over recognized in SPED, like put into SPED services when it's really not a SPED issue. That is not happening in our district. We are really good about making sure that if a student needs those services, they really need it, and it's not just a language problem that we need to work with. So I think that's kind of just a little summary for you.
The complexity of having so few students is every time one student is passing or not passing, there's 8, that's a 12%. Right? Because we're dealing with such a small denominator, any kind of statistics. In some cases, you would be concerned that data might be personally identifiable if you broke it out by grade level or something. So even though you hide the names of the kids, if there's only one kiddo in that grade, all of a sudden things are personally identifiable. So when Julie is describing difficulty of the data, it's just because our denominator is so small and our population is so small.
And our ELs, we are graduating them on time. And that's something we've done, whether they're former or current ELs, they are graduating on time with their peers. And that's even if they graduate as a current EL, they are still getting through their classes and graduating. So we've worked really hard making sure those kids graduate on time with their peers.
I appreciate your availability tonight, Julie. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Great.
Thanks, Julie.
Anybody have any questions? We're gonna go vote.
Have a good night.
It just seems like it's awful tough on the staff, like Julie and the ones that helped her. You know, competing when we're at 8%, when you look at all the others, you know, how much money are we spending just to cover this? And our next percent, they're looking at 60 to 83%. Every time doing the same thing.
Every one of our grants that we received, the label as grant dollars from the state, has some kind of a compliance report. And those numbers of reports have grown over the years. So while we lose staffing, we need to spend more time focusing on our students, numbers of just busy work, things we have to usually don't really impact the student in the classroom. It's the biggest frustration I have with this. It has grown, right? I need to stop. You're on a rant. Our staff need to be with our kids in the classroom where the work is, making outcomes. All right, here you go.
Okay, let's move on to
I
discussion.
needed an action item there.
Oh, sorry.
So we can submit it.
And move we accept the action item number 8A, approving the English language, English learners in Oregon.
Motion made by Bonnie Brewer, seconded by Bob, to accept the action item, English learners in Oregon annual report. All in favor, say aye and raise your hand.
Aye.
You unanimous. Now let's go to discussion.
Do we want to dive into this policy concept?
That's probably a good place to start.
So if you go in order from the top page, the first page is a standard policy. You did a whole bunch of those last year. You're very familiar with that. The second piece of paper is an AR. What I like to kind of point you to is on the third and fourth page. This pattern of paper has been repeated, I think, 6 times in this file. And it gives a short summary statement of what it is. And the second part is a group of individuals. In this case, the first one is the administrators. The administrators' response in this policy. What NAPA did, I interviewed their superintendent, Bill Fritz, and their board in trying to come up with a way to address civility for their district, decided that they needed to invest time with stakeholder groups. And so if you go through all those double pages, there's administrator stakeholders, teachers, classified employees, high school students, middle school students, parents, and community, I believe, are the 7 groups, which is a good representation of who we would be interested in as well. The
We have policies already dealing with this stuff.
not for community civility, we have policies that will talk about, behavior and expectations and, in a different way. This is trying to be a more proactive, and I'll show you, I think, where the difference is about this effort. By working with those stakeholder groups, they took a focus on commitments and expectations. What does an administrative group commit to for their school district? And what does an administrative group have expectations of their school district? What do parents commit to doing? What do parents expect? What do students commit to doing? What do students expect? in their school district. And to accomplish this, the board first had to come up with their purpose for why we want this policy. We believe in our district, we need to see the following culture element, positivity for us or whatever it may be. From there, they hired a facilitator and they brought in an outside person who would be unbiased. And that person went around to those 7 stakeholder groups and interviewed them and talked about wants and needs, commitments and expectations, and took all the feedback from a stakeholder group and developed that group's commitments, that group's expectations. So when you go through the pile of paper I gave you, you'll notice there's some pretty big differences. Certain groups committing and certain groups expecting things, but you can also see how they would relate to those stakeholders. He says they review this policy every year with those groups, the opportunity to update commitments and expectations about what we believe, what we're willing to provide. It's reviewed annually. Having the outside facilitator and that neutral person help them gain information from the stakeholder groups and felt was helpful. They only did it the first time because after that, people knew what was going on and they had a template from the previous year to work off of. I think if we want to pursue a positive culture policy, that we might need to start first with a work session of the board and develop what we think we need to see for a value so that hiring a facilitator to engage stakeholder groups can be directed work. Now, both the buildings in the meantime have to start the school year. In-service is next week. And as Jerry and I lead staff through culture and cultures, we're going to be using language about what do we expect, what do we commit to doing? Because if the board comes to this policy and this is something we develop, you'll be able to join language that the schools are already trying to use. Hopefully it dovetails. We don't want the 2 buildings to start working on their cultures and their agreements for the year and have it be in conflict with potential policy work that you may or may not choose to do. So that's I guess, a segue to a discussion, to see what we want to think there.
Just required by law.
No, this would be something that they did, they felt a need, that they wanted to address. That would be what we would do out of need if we deal with the board.
Is there, outline or, I mean, is Title IX, special ed, reporting of child abuse, reporting of sexual abuse, is that all outlined or protected in this? Have you been able to go through it to see that it?
This does not trump or change any of those legally required policies. This is, to an extent, I asked Bill, I said, how do we enforce this? He said, it's a starting point for conversations before problems occur. It really doesn't enforce anything. It doesn't say who or what. We expect these things. And by our expectations of a positive school culture, we commit to doing this as a group and do our part to be part of that positive school culture. It's trying to take the opposite track of do this or else to we want to do this because this represents who we are. Okay, so it doesn't have teeth the way some of the policies do, and it doesn't conflict with some of the legal policies that we have to.
So you have 7 different groups, according to this. Basically,
And that was for them.
that was for them, but going with that, 7 different groups, you're gonna have an outside facilitator address these groups, and how do you bring those people together?
We do a lot of advertising. You try to emphasize what the project is, and then you hope you get input. Groups like your high school students, where you get a high school leadership group, you have a pretty good audience. you have staff meetings, a pretty good way to get some of those groups. Parents and community probably the toughest, require the most advertising. And kind of forewarning that this is what we want to do, this is the open effort. We have one shot with this facilitator to gain your input in forming this policy. Please come join us, sort of approach. Once the policy was built, though, Bill said, it hasn't been hard to reconvene people to review it and double check. Do you still have the same commitments and the same expectations as we did last year? Because people know what the product is and they see that value because it's important to them too.
So once this is all put together, you present it to these different groups then again to see if this meets what their expectations are.
His description of the facilitator worked with a group for a couple hours, start to finish. And before they left, okay, this is what I'm hearing. These are your expectations. These are your commitments. Do I have them right? Have we summarized them correctly? And when he hasn't feels he's got a consensus, then he takes it, collects it, that's done. That group is dismissed. You don't really need to re-engage them for another year.
Okay. They say how long it took them to get this all together.
You know, I did ask the full timeline. A work session followed by probably off and on a week's worth of stakeholder engagement. Reading one, reading two, probably takes 7 months. Just into my brain, I don't see it being a quick process. Because you think you have the idea, you get your commitments and expectations from your stakeholder groups, put out draft version 1 for reading 1, then you don't want to approve it that night. You want to let people percolate on it a little bit. Maybe by a second reading, you come back and say, hearing no objections, we want this to be our policy and vote on it. That sounds like at least 3 months to me, of meetings.
Looking at the stakeholders under community, did the superintendent there have to say, who actually was the community stakeholders? I mean, I'm thinking stakeholders for us could be, people like, the Reef or Friends of the Library. I saw so many kids down there, Parks and Recreation, involved. Should be targeted for community involvement, or
I think you would communicate to those groups that you're having a meeting and would love to see participation. I don't know that you would overemphasize, we only want this group and you want that group. You could certainly go to some of those areas and say, hey, we're having a meeting on this date, facilitator, budget 2 hours of your time. And we want to go through this activity of developing commitments and expectations to help us inform on the policy. And then you're kind of relying on volunteers and to want to kind of participate at that point.
So how would we advertise this, Joe? I mean, in an area where we don't have like a local paper, would you do it on KDU? I mean, and not every list is stable, so.
Can't do Facebook, but if you want to reach out to specific, reach out to your boosters, reach out and tell me, and let them have their organizational meetings and tell their members. You can probably gain some traction that way. I think you would want to go down to the senior center, you want to tell your Rotary Club. And once you post it, you can't really twist people's arms too hard after that. You could tell Luma, and you've got several churches who will be able to hear information if they have the ability to share in their announcements.
one of the things, I talked to one of the coaches that they have, he said one of the things that kind of hurt him in the beginning was utilizing social media, which I thought, yeah, we could be that paper.
One of the, when you talk, you're looking at the pages, these stop signs, it says right underneath the stop sign, use of social media is not a way to raise concerns in Napa. Please use the process in the following flow chart. It's more likely to help. And it provides a summarized version of their complaint process. And it says, basically don't go to social media and just complain and do nothing. here's the complaint process. This is how you let us know what the issues are so that we can make effective use of your information and feedback. I heard quite a bit in the last month about the need for positive culture, and I certainly see this as a possible vehicle. And the board's work in developing policy around it really is a demonstration to everybody who's been concerned how serious this is, and that we have been paying attention, and we want to really find a mechanism to enact some change.
Okay, what do you want to do? You want to get the decisions? Yeah.
I would recommend the activity I have to start us to develop our values comes from a company called Point North. And I think it's realistic to expect that you'll need an hour to puzzle through this activity as a 5-member board to identify what are the key elements of your values. And then we can begin to look at model policy or sample policy and when draft it into something. I would suggest maybe a Saturday. And you can spend a couple hours just sitting and working. It'll be a work session, which means it is open to the public to view. It won't be open to the public to comment, but they can watch us do the work.
There's,
I gotta. To me, still some figuring out.
that big, we're better. Everybody, then you can.
With the numbers of events happening in the coming weeks, getting opening for school, I'd like to say September 14th. That's Saturday. Oh, no. You won't be here. You're out. I won't be. I might be getting. Um. Well, Saturday, the 31st, that's the last Saturday, that's the Labor Day weekend, or. Oh. That's the wrong side of that there. September. What's how's that looking for folks? You know, we need to get out of the ways. September 28th, Saturday, 9 to noon. Thumbs up on that date, and I'll have Sharman send out some calendar invites.
Yeah. I do that.
Yeah. Fine,
As far as I know right now,
okay.
should be that way then.
Yeah, just have to give the, leave the letter about. Yeah. What?
Golf tournament.
I know it's a Sunday.
Okay.
I think, yeah, they weren't told us the date.
September 15th.
It's September 28th, 9 to 12 work session. Sharman will send out invites and she'll get it posted for us. We'll start with Point North activity. And then we can look at our sample policy and see where we want to go from there and engaging stakeholder groups.
I think it behooves everybody to take this home and break it down for. Right. Use several different colors of crayons.
Remember that most of these pages are repetitive sets, one for administrators, one for teachers out, so. Once you see the flow of it, you won't need to have all the copies of all the pages. This is the entire set. Thank you.
John, I have one more question about that. After we put this together and everything, how does it go out then to the different groups? I mean,
You publish it on your policy page, because this will become board policy. That's one of the jobs of the board, along with your budgeting and evaluation meet, is to create policy. This is important, and this is a policy that gets enacted and go through a couple of readings, and the state gets voted on. It's an action. It's on the policy page. It's a school board law. This is what we expect. This is what we commit to.
so is anything going in the handbooks or anything to refer to this policy?
Handbooks would want to cite parts of this accordingly and appropriately.
Yeah.
Probably wouldn't put the entire thing in, you know, but I mean, just like we have to make references to our bullying policy in the handbook, and then put the whole thing in, but you can reference, you have one, and you direct people where to get the information.
Will this officially take effect next school year?
It takes effect as soon as you take action on it. So potentially November, December of this year, if it can move at that kind of pace. But again, I would really believe it's at least 2 readings by the board, one to have a policy and make sure the community can see it in the packet, community can review it, give community comment before you take a second action to approve it.
But realistic. The school can be out.
I think very realistically, we'll have it by winter. If you want to work at it, I think that the Saturday drafting session will be hard work. And then the feedback will flow into what gets drafted in your Saturday work session. 2 readings after that minimum, probably in the winter.
Good.
The other discussion. Anybody had a chance to digest this agreement, his views on it? Okay. Any new community comments? You can see if they've been.
And you tell, I don't see any numbers, so I think we're okay.
Okay. Board member comments. Bob.
One.
I do. My grandson invited me to the Great Garden last Thursday night for their end of the year, summer work experience of working in the Great Garden and growing, vegetables and learning work experience. And, Mrs. Watts was there, her and her husband provided a meal for everybody, and parents and the grandparents came of the kids that were working there. And it was a really nice thing. They've done a really, really good job. I was not, for as long as I've been here, and that Great Garden's been there, I've never really taken a look at it. But walking into it, it's huge. It's bigger than what you look at just driving alongside the road. I encourage everybody to kind of take a peek at it. The kids did a lot of work, a lot of fruits and vegetables, well, not fruits so much, but vegetables growing in that garden. A lot of people have rented spaces and are growing their own produce and stuff. And it was wonderful. It was wonderful. I think it's a great opportunity for kids. I know my grandson's learned a whole lot. So,
It was really neat because your grandson, these kids leave us with a resume, a work experience, and a bank account. So your grandson made almost $1,000 this summer learning to work. He saved his money. He's buying landscape equipment. So we'll have another landscaper to bid out soon, I think. He really bit into it and he's taken on voluntary hours. I think he met with Ms. Wall. And he's keeping the garden going because we have planted pumpkins for kindergartners. So Bonnie and her grandson are maintaining the garden right now. Thank you.
yes, that's, he's been thrilled to do that.
This is the same grandson you couldn't get to mow your lawn?
It is.
When I get you in the boat, we're gonna have to go talk. Talk to the clothes, not this, you know.
I told him the other day, I said, okay, so when I dropped him off at home, I said, you know, Jacob, I said, you could, it's a very good front yard. I said, you could really use your speech learning to clean this up. You know, and everything. And so, yeah. And so then later I said, well, I'm gonna be checking on it. So I texted him later and I said, so send me a picture of what you did. I haven't seen a picture of it yet. So I don't know. Maybe went to the river today. Yeah, but thank you. It was,
You're welcome. And Reed provided all those raised gardens.
Brady provided those. That's
Yes.
wonderful. So, and there's future plans for that, right?
There's so much, Dr. Shimoto Kara is in there. We have so much more going. Yeah.
Thank you for what you guys are doing for the kids. It's great. I know it was great for friends.
Mr. Unser, is the schedules out for cross country volleyball and football yet?
I say it hasn't happened. I think I think Watts is still working on volleyball, football's done. And we're still working on cross country. I have most of it.
Football's up almost at least.
I think so, I'm not sure. So,
I couldn't find it.
Okay.
Maybe came up the last 3 or 4 days. I looked for the week and then. I put it out there.
yeah, I'll check with him, see if they're up there.
Okay, thanks. Board member comments. Ladies and gentlemen, we're moving forward and we hope for a great school year, even though the state won't help us out with anything. And if you're interested in the program we're gonna do with following NAPA's community civility program, then stay tuned with please stay in touch. And I have one more question. This is Adams. What is Wonderopolis?
Oh, Wonderopolis is a great day, Mr. Jones. So Wonderopolis is where I ask the kids very kind of broad or vague questions about history, and they tell me everything they've ever wondered about history, and we paint it all over the walls of my classroom. And it is great. It's awesome.
You do that in 47 minutes.
We do. We do. A lot of wondering can happen in
I'm
47
gonna have to come back myself. I can see that. Future agenda, staff in service Monday, August 19th, 7:30 to 12 p.m. First day of school, Monday, August 26th, 2024. Labor Day, there'll be no school Monday, September 2nd, so we'll go to school Friday, September 6th. The September board meeting is going to be Wednesday, September 11th. We'll wait on Charmin to make sure that we can get this 28th of September thing, the work session for that. And
Mr. Chair,
yes, sir.
we are invited to the youth service. Board is invited, so that 7:30 time, there'll be some breakfast out. Staff will start kind of gathering at 8, and in about 8:45, we'll be meeting in the Civil Auditorium to go over welcome back to the school year. So board members are invited to attend that.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you, sir. Anything else, Dad? Ladies and gentlemen, we are adjourned. So we're attending. Okay.